Welcome to an episode of the Phoenix Rising podcast, journeys of descending into the mysteries and rising from the roots.
Thank you so much for joining me
Lisa
for
Hillier,
an episode of the Phoenix Rising podcast. Please like, share, download, subscribe if you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next
online
week
courses
for another
and
episode
Patreon
of the
portal.
Phoenix Rising podcast.
And I have a very exciting workshop coming up in the Patreon portal around healing the father wound, which is so powerful and integral to healing our relationship with the masculine. So the link is in the show notes to join the Patreon. And today I have Emma Halley on the show with me. And Emma is a spiritual wellness coach and meditation teacher, a crystal therapist and writer specializing in helping women come home to themselves. Her current work, Decoding the Feminine, is an in-depth look at the connection between the moon and our cycles, teaching us to reconnect to our cyclical nature and understand the ebb and the flow of the energies as they cross over. This is such a powerful, powerful episode connecting to the cycle that is within the cauldron of our womb as women. And so can't wait to sink into this episode with you. Welcome to an episode of the Phoenix Rising podcast, and I am here with Emma. Welcome, Emma. And to start, we're going to start with the big question of what has been the journey that has led you to the work that you're offering the world today.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's such a lovely question. It's just, there's so much juiciness in it. So the path that's led me to where I am today, although it started a long, like many years ago, just this particular path that I'm on now was kind of came into my field a few years ago when it was the beginning of the lockdowns, actually, in the beginning of the kind of the COVID journey, and I was in a really bad place. You could say it was a dark night of the soul. It wasn't one of the darkest, but I was definitely in a bad place, and I'd been on a spiritual path somewhat previously, and I just found myself in this like this gaping void of not having my sisters, not having that feminine presence of women around me that understood me, and not understanding myself. I didn't understand me. I couldn't, and I felt like there was this massive piece of information missing from my relationship with myself, and I couldn't get to grips with it. And I knew that I was being led down a path of working with my body, my physical body, and in particular with my cycle, and with coming to a better relationship with my cycle and with my periods and with my bleed and all of that. And I started looking at the seasons. You know, there's a lot of stuff online that is around the seasons of your cycle, around the spring, the summer, the autumn, the winter, and it hadn't really been in my field until I felt in this particular void, and I went looking for something, and I just did what I always do. I went onto Pinterest, actually, is my first place, and I typed in a few words and start scrolling and taking in little bits of information, and what does the summer of my period mean, and what does the spring mean, and all of this information started kind of coming in that was just going click click click, and I was thinking, yes, this is leading me somewhere, this is something. And then I'd just met some women online. I just started following some women online who were doing the work, and I was craving that. As I said, I was craving that feminine, that sisterhood, and I was kind of stalking some of these women on Instagram that were doing the work. And one of them was our mutual friend Kathy Bell, and we were chatting about her breath work. And of all the synchronicities to have ever happened, she messaged me and said, I posted, I was making crystal therapy jewelry at the time, and she messaged me and said, the bracelet that you've just posted is beautiful, I love it. And it was a cycle tracker bracelet. I'd made a cycle tracker bracelet, and she said, I'm doing a program called Journey with Your Cycle, and we are going to use the process of breathwork to dig into the seasons of your cycle. And my whole body lit up, and I went, this is what I'm supposed to do. I was completely in fear at the time. I said to her, I'm not ready. She completely gave me the space to feel into it and see whether or not I wanted to dig into that. And I took the leap. I just took the leap, and I did that program with her for 4 months. I think we spent doing that, and it fundamentally changed the relationship that I had with my body. I came out of it and went just further down this rabbit hole, just this concept of loving my period, this like loving it. I mean, like deeply loving my bleed and the magic that it brings. This idea that my womb is a cauldron, that it's a cooking pot of magic and amazingness, that from me and women springs life. Like there's nothing else in the universe that does what women do in that way. And it's just been a snowball, an absolute snowball of learning and unlearning and piecing it together. And previous to any of that work, when I was working with crystals, I was also doing a little bit of moon work. I was doing full moon bits and pieces and new moon bits and pieces. And the two just kind of started to synchronize. The two just started to marry up. I mean, we all know that we're connected to the moon. We all know that as women, our cycle is connected to the moon. But how many of us actually really understand that connection and how deep it goes? And that's what I started leaning into. And then I started noticing the ebbs and the flows and the peaks and troughs and the crossovers, like the alignment and the resistance when we're in a particular part of the moon phase and in a particular season of our cycle. And it all just developed into this like knowledge that I had for myself. That was what I wanted. I wanted the knowledge of myself. I wanted to deepen that relationship with myself, and I created it. And then people started asking me about it and started asking me to share what I'd learned about myself and how that could relate to them. And so the Decoding the Feminine was born out of that kind of need to translate it somehow so that other women could understand it, could read it, and could apply it to themselves. So yeah, that's been the last few years.
Beautiful. And is Decoding the Feminine, is that your book?
Yeah, that's the diary that's coming out on the 8th of November.
Oh, wow. That's like right around the corner. I can't believe it's already November 1st.
I know.
Why? I love that. The connection with your cycle, with your period. And it's such a journey, because I think as a society, as a collective, we've been so programmed to think of it as an inconvenience. It's gross, it's dirty, all the dialogue that comes along with it. But it's so powerful. I actually haven't had a period for a year. So I think I'm going through menopause, which is crazy because I'm only 42. But not having it anymore, I realized like I loved it.
Yeah.
So much. But that was mostly for the past, probably 5 or so years. For the previous, 20 or however many years it was that I had it, I despised it and did everything I could to to silence it, to make it go away. And it's so programmed in our society. My daughter, when she first, was going on, looking at birth control and everything, we went into the doctor's office. And one of the first things the doctor said to her was, well, if you take it and you don't stop, then you don't get your period anymore. Like that's a good thing. And I was horrified, because I'm like, why would you not want your period? Like it is such a natural part of being a woman. So it's just interesting, the dialogue that's out in the world that goes against our period and our blood.
It goes deep. It goes beyond. I mean, everybody around me was very much, and still a lot of women around me still are, of the opinion that it's an inconvenience and oh God, I hate it, and oh God, I wish I didn't have it, and I can't wait till I'm in menopause and I don't have to have it anymore. And what I find really, really heartbreaking is that it goes so far beyond just hating your period into we're conditioned to hate ourselves, because by default, if I hate the thing that makes me a woman, then I hate myself. Like that, like you say, the word despise. If I despise that part of me, what damage are we doing to ourselves by carrying that level of emotion at our core for something that is so natural and so feminine and so magic? I mean, it's magic. I've got stepdaughters, I've got teenage sons myself, I've got stepdaughters, and it's already programmed into them before they start their cycle. It's already programmed that it's going to be horrible, and they get, instead of getting joy and celebration about this process starting, about this transition into womanhood, they get pity and despair. And I'm I try to undo some of that programming, but it's so deep. It's so deep in all of that.
Yeah, it's so deep. And I often get that when, people find out that I've stopped bleeding and am in menopause, which I don't actually believe as truth in my body. So I'm doing some stuff to, natural protocols to try to get my period back, because I just don't believe that it's actually menopause. But everybody's like, oh, you're so lucky. And I'm like, no, actually.
I'm 39 and I think I'm on the cusp of perimenopause myself, and I'm almost sad about it. It's like I've just discovered this thing that I love about myself, and all of these years wasted on not understanding the magic of it. All of these years gone that I can't get back. That I should have been loving myself for it.
Yeah. I believe mine's going to come back. We'll see how that journey goes.
Well, it will. We'll manifest that.
Might be a whole podcast episode of when it does come back. So with that, just a side note, a great documentary to watch about birth control is The Business of Birth Control, and why birth control has been sold to us, as a way to distort our period and invert a whole bunch of stuff. So anyway, that is a very interesting documentary to watch about birth control and our period as well. But aside from that, can you give everybody kind of a synopsis, we'll call it, of the cycles and the seasons that we go through in our monthly cycle and what that looks like?
Yeah, so we're just so inherently linked to nature. We're so the connection to the earth is so deep within us as women, and the connection to the moon as well. And this is the work that I want to bring to the table, is this connection between the two. As within, so without, as above, so below, that kind of the earth and the moon. So within our body, we reflect the seasons back to ourselves. Like the seasons are reflected back to us from within our body. We have a winter, which is when we bleed. So in nature, winter is the beginning. I mean, today is actually the first day of winter. And when we talk about like with the wheel of the year, the Halloween Samhain last night was actually New Year's Eve for the old ancient calendars. So we're on day one today of winter. And when we refer to our period, we refer to day one, to the first day of our bleed as being day one. So winter is the beginning. We have that it's a going within. It's a stillness. There's a I don't want to use the word barrenness, but there's that. There's no activity above surface. Everything's happening below. Everything's happening below the earth. Everything's happening inside. That's where the magic is. That's where when nature does it, she sends the energy to the roots of the trees. When we do it, we send the energy to our womb. We send to the core of us. So we have that winter when your body really calls for quiet and it calls for stillness. And we live in a world that does not honor the feminine cycle at all. So we struggle with it because we don't live a life where we're allowed to have stillness and have quiet and have peace. We're not structured like that. We're not conditioned like that. So we struggle with it. And I find that, or I think that a lot of the horrible symptoms that come along with our periods are partly our body screaming out to us because we're resisting something that we should be doing, this state of stillness and nurturing and nourishing. And then we go into spring, which is that period immediately after your bleed, when your energy starts to build. It would be the follicular phase of your period, when of your cycle, when you're kind of coming out of that, of the cave of the winter. You're coming out of that, the depth and the darkness and the stillness, and we start to set intentions. We start to plant seeds. We start to look at the spring. Look how the spring creeps into the world, and the flowers begin to bloom, and the trees begin to bear their leaves, and we just have that kind of awakening, that creeping into the sunlight. And we do this as women. We have this energy build up. We have this like, we're able to step back out into the world. We're able to see ourselves coming back out of this craving for stillness. And it moves us into summer. I mean, a lot of women in their spring have a tendency to rush. And this is something that I learned from Kathy in particular, that spring really isn't about rushing. It's about being measured, and it's about being like considered and slow and gentle. And we're not gentle with ourselves. Something else that we don't do. We're not gentle with ourselves as women at all. As soon as we've got so much to do, that as soon as we have that tiny little bit of energy, we have to do everything all at once. So we're not very good at guarding our energy. We're not very good at being considered and being more gentle with ourselves. And then we head into summer, which is our ovulation. And it's when we have the most energy. It's when we are fertile and voluptuous and abundant. And we reflect summer in its beauty and its glow. And the days are long and energy is boundless. And we really thrive in summer. And it's ovulation. It was the time when we would have been most sexually attractive, because that's the time when we were most fertile. Everything about us would have been glowing and beautiful, and everything's just aligned. This is when we feel that everything is just going well, and we're on top of it. We've got this. And again, we push. We don't guard our energy. We go to town in this phase. We just throw ourselves into everything. We push ourselves beyond our limits because we have all this energy. We don't guard ourselves. And then we can cause a lot of overwhelm and a lot of burnout in this with this kind of need to, while I've got the energy, I need to do all the things kind of mentality. And then we go into autumn, and autumn is that PMS, PMT window. And I love the reflection of nature in this premenstrual phase, because we all talk about being premenstrual as being just angry and rage-filled and crazy and wild, and everything, all these emotions come bubbling to the surface. And look what autumn does. Look how autumn is wet and windy and muddy and messy and wild. And we reflect that within ourselves. We have this need to move and to shake it off. We're releasing, we're going into that process. We're heading into winter, we're preparing for winter. Our body's trying to shake everything off, move everything through, because we need to be quiet and we need to be still when we come into that winter. And again, we resist this so much. We hold ourselves back. And there's a book that I've read and I absolutely adore it. It's called Her Blood is Gold. And she says in that book, she talks about how, what if the rage that comes in your autumn, what if the rage that comes in your premenstrual phase is your way of pushing everybody and everything away from you, so that you can have that solitude and you can have that peace and that quiet in your winter? What if it's just your body doing what it needs to do to create the space that it needs to create? And I was, when that landed for me, that landed so hard that it was like, it was eye-opening. It suddenly changed everything about my cycle. It changed everything about how I dealt with that premenstrual phase of my period, and I started allowing myself the space. But linking all of that to the moon has her own cycles. The moon has her own seasons. She has the full moon, which is the ovulation, the abundance, the everything larger than life. She has the new moon, the dark moon, the winter, when she craves stillness, and the energy is very still. And then you have the waxing moons and the waning moons, which are very spring and autumn like in their energy. and we're affected by the moon. And so we can either have this alignment or this conflict where we can be in alignment with the moon, having our winter with the new moon, having our winter with the dark moon, when our body wants still and the moon gives us still. And then in the summer, we can have our ovulation at the full moon, when our body's in summer and it's got boundless energy, and the full moon is shining a light, illuminating everything and giving you more boundless energy. And then you can have the opposite of that. We can be at odds with the moon. And that's when there's some really deep healing that comes about. That's when we really struggle when we're in, if you find yourself having your bleed under the full moon, in my experience, in the work that I've done so far, and the women that I've spoken to so far on this journey, you will have a much more difficult time in your bleed, in your autumn and your winter will be so much more difficult if you're at odds with the moon's energy, if the moon is full at the same time, because the moon's trying to illuminate everything. The moon wants to shine a light on all of your emotions. That's what she does when she's full. And you're trying to go deep and go within in your winter, and you're trying to come home to yourself and go down, and the moon is just trying to illuminate. And there can be some really, really magical healing that comes from that combination of the energy, if we can surrender to it. If you can surrender to the moon illuminating the emotions of the depth of your winter, it can, there's some deep magic in that. It feels really uncomfortable, but there's deep magic there. And so that's really what the diary is about. It's about like checking where the moon is, checking where you are, and seeing what's going on with those energies and how it could be playing out within your body.
Yeah. And it's so powerful. And I think for, everybody listening, it's like, it doesn't matter if you bleed with the new moon, like they did in ancient times when everybody like sat in a red tent. There's nothing wrong. We have fluorescent lights. We have all these screens and things that stimulate us and change our cycle. And so if you're bleeding like nowhere linked to the moon, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong. It's just starting to observe how it feels for you. And, I remember when I would bleed on the full moon sometimes, my whole cycle actually felt much more the same. The whole moon cycle, the whole month would feel more the same if I was bleeding with the full moon. There wasn't the intensity of going through the archetype. So it's just interesting how it plays out for each woman. And I think to deepen that connection with our cycle is just to observe and be like, what am I feeling? Where's the moon at? Keeping a diary of it, keeping track with it, of it.
And that's it, because it's about deepening that relationship with yourself, because we need to love ourselves more. That's what it's all there is to it. That's all there is to it. We need to love ourselves more. And I think that the best relationship that I should have in this lifetime is the relationship that I have with myself. And it's a relationship that I've really struggled with most of my life. And I think a lot of women do. And so this brought a whole new level of understanding to my body. It brought a whole new level of love for my body, and just love for its cycles, and love for its synchronicities, and its ebbs and its flows and its waxes and its wanes, and just this deepening of my knowledge of myself. And what greater gift could I give myself than that, than loving myself enough to do that?
It's like knowing yourself on a really deep, intimate level, and intimacy always has to start with the self for it to ripple out in a powerful way to our loved ones and our beloved and our children and all that kind of magic. I love what you spoke about with the wild woman. So I've linked that, we can link it with archetypes as well. What you spoke to so beautifully with the seasons, and the, PMS phase is like the wild woman, and she's in her emotions and her grief and her rage. And I think why women struggle a lot with PMS, like with symptoms and cramps and pains, is because they're repressing all the emotions all the time. We've been so programmed to repress our emotions and not be angry or sad or be in our grief. And then that starts to manifest in our body as physical symptoms. So it's like when that grief comes up, when that rage comes up, allowing it to do what it wants to do. That's our natural
and following it, like follow the clues. Your body's giving you clues. Literally, that's the only thing I teach to my clients, that the only thing that you ever really need to know is that your body has all the answers, and it's always trying to communicate with you. It's always trying to communicate with you. Every sensation that you have is a communication from your body, and we just need to tune into it. But I love working with the archetypes. I love the winter of the crone and the autumn of the wild woman. I love that that again, it's just another layer of the women's connection to nature, and another layer of women's connection to the earth. And the moon is reflected in the archetypes as well. The moon is reflected in the dark moon being the crone, and the waxing moon being the maiden. And everything's connected. As women, we're so connected to everything. We're like, there's so much magic in that. Like, there's so much love to be had in that, just in that depth of gratitude for the fact that I get to be a woman in this life. I get to have that connection to the moon. I get to have that connection to the earth. Like, that's out of this world to me. And I say this to clients in circles all the time. You're magical just because you're here. That's it. You're magic because you're here. Yeah. You don't need to have another reason to be magic. You don't need to have something like a label to make yourself special. You're magic because you're here.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what really came through for me when you spoke to that, and there was something earlier on in the conversation, I think when you were speaking to like an ovulation and when burnout usually happens, because there's a tendency, a programming as women to give, like do. And our society is very much set up in a way that's constantly doing linear,
the masculine.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And it's I mean, there's so many beautiful aspects to that masculine container when it's in balance, but there's not the support of the feminine in that. And so that like constantly doing leads to the burnout, to the overwhelm, to the irritation, the frustration. And what you were speaking to was just felt like that, like being and slowing down, just by simply being here, you're magic. There's nothing that you need to do. And that is like, so the feminine essence is just like the being, descending, being with the earth, being in the moment, that richness and fertility that's so alive there.
Yeah.
So for you, what was kind of the entry point, or how you work with clients, the entry point to start to work with your cycle? What does that look like?
I think that it starts with that want to love yourself. I definitely think it starts with a desire to love yourself. I suppose the easiest way to talk about it is to say, how do you learn to love your period? Like, how do you learn to love your period? And women ask me all the time when I say, I love my period. No, you don't. No, I do. I really do. How do you start to love your period? The first thing to do is to look for something, just one thing, just look for something that you love about it. And I think for many women, it is simply the fact that you get to rest. Like, you're tired, right? Where you're in your winter, you're bleeding, you're tired. We want the comfort. We get the hot water bottle, we get the chocolate, we cozy up, we get the blanket. Why what's not to love? Like, love that. Start to love that. And then once you plant that seed of loving it, I love the fact that I get to just get that space for myself. I get to do that for myself. Like, the rest of the month, because, and I'm not talking personally, I'm just talking in general terms for most women, the rest of the month I won't eat the chocolate bar because I hate my body and I don't want to put on weight, and I don't want to, I don't want to do that, and I'll feel guilty if I have it. There's so much of that going on in our minds all the time, and then we have our period and we go, oh, I'm just going to eat the chocolate. Well, if that's all you can find to love about it, then latch onto that, grab it with both hands, grab that fact. If that's the thing that you can hold, that I love, that I let myself do something. I let myself eat the chocolate bar. I let myself sit on the sofa with the hot water bottle, which I wouldn't do in the rest of the month because I'd feel guilty for sitting still. to grab on with both hands to something that you love about it, and then start to look forward to that piece of it. So that that's what I started to do. I started to look for the reasons that I could love that part of my cycle. And for me, it was, as I said earlier, that the kind of when it dropped in, that perhaps my rage was me pushing people away so that I could have some solitude. So instead of waiting for the rage to push people away, instead of, what I used to do was come up to my bedroom and close the door and lay on the bed and want silence away from, you know, all the family and the teenagers and everything else that was going on. Instead of waiting for the rage to get me there, I just did it. I just took myself away. I gave myself solitude. I explained to my partner, look, you know, if I go and lay on the bed, I'm just laying on the bed for several hours. You can leave me there. Like, I'm not, you don't need to worry. There's nothing wrong. I'm just giving myself something. I'm giving myself some time. And I started doing that. And again, I told myself, the conditioning was, I told myself, I'm on my period, so I'm allowed to do it. I don't have to feel guilty about, like, you know, not cooking the dinner or entertaining the kids or anything like that. I can do this. So that was where it started for me. And then it spread out into other things. It spread out into other areas. I started nurturing my autumn. I started then looking at, because I'd made that correlation between my rage and my solitude, I started nurturing myself. I started thinking, I am filled with this agitated energy, so I'm going to dance. So I'd put the music on and I'd just dance around the kitchen, and I'd feel better for it, for just throwing myself around the kitchen like nobody was watching. And then I'd laugh because it was just joy filled. There was just so much joy in it. And who can be agitated and ragey when there's just joy? And even if I was agitated and ragey, even if I did feel like that, I'd scream, I'd cry, I'd let myself. It's just about giving yourself permission. Like, there's nothing wrong with you when you feel like that, and it will pass, because you're cyclical. And I think starting this journey, we need to constantly remind ourselves that we're cyclical. You need to constantly remind yourself you're cyclical. It will pass. The winter will pass. The autumn will pass. The bits that are uncomfortable will pass. You will get through them. So if you know that you're going to get through them, how can you lean into them to get as much out of them as possible? Like, squeeze the magic out of them, because I know it's going to pass, so I don't have to fight it anymore. I can give myself permission to open up to it. And what comes from that? What do I learn about myself from that? You know? Yeah. So I think you just have to plant the seed, start somewhere, find something really small to notice about your cycle, to notice about yourself, to love about it, and go, that's a yummy bit that's something that I can hold on to that, and then watch it overflow into every other area of your cycle. Yeah. That need to observe, and that need to love a part of it or an element of it.
I love that. It's like, whenever we find something to love about even the things that we might have been conditioned to hate, the love starts to grow. Like, when we appreciate, the word actually means to grow. And so that can ripple out to so many areas in life. If you don't like something, it's like, maybe just find one little area that you love about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Find that, because you're right. It does. Like, love grows. It doesn't matter what you do with it. It doesn't matter where you put it. It grows regardless. And so, like, turn it inwards. Yeah. You can do the same when you look at yourself in the mirror, can't you? That's what they say when it comes to loving what you see in the mirror. Find one thing to focus on that you love. Yeah. And then you'll see more. Then you'll see something else to love. And it always comes back to giving yourself permission to love yourself. Another book that I've read quite recently is a book called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. And it's beautiful. And one of the questions that he asks, or he advises that you ask yourself, whenever you face a decision, or whenever you face something that's a challenge, or something where you feel resistance, is if I loved myself, really truly loved myself, what decision would I make? What choice would I make? if I really, really loved myself, what action would I take? And that, I think, could change lives.
Yeah.
Just that really simple question.
Yeah, beautiful. With, when you really attuned to your cycle and fell in love with your period, what did it unlock for you, if that question makes sense? Yeah.
Oh gosh, so much. There was so much. I mean, in material terms, it unlocked a whole new path of my business, a whole new path. I had no idea that I'd be doing this work. I had no idea that this was going to be where I was led to go with this. I did it for me, I started this journey for me. I had no idea it was going to create a book and clients and teachings and things like that. It released a lot of fear. It released an awful lot of fear, actually. I think I held myself back from so many things because of fear, and in just loving myself, in that capacity and deepening that relationship with myself, I started to release so much fear. I was braver. I was braver about so many things. Physically, I can honestly say, and I'm really careful to say this because I don't want to go, I don't want people to go, well, you said that this would happen if I did this. For me personally, and I know for lots and lots of other women as well who have done this journey, there are lots of people who have worked with falling in love with their cycle, and many of them say the same thing: the uncomfortable symptoms, the pains, the cramps, the PMS, all of that have kind of gone. Like they have. Like I say it cautiously because I can't say for certain that that's the reason, but there's definitely a correlation between my relationship with my period and my relationship with my cycle and how minimal my symptoms are now of it, which was fascinating. It's fascinating to sit back and say, oh, I haven't had cramps for a long time. I haven't had headaches with my period for a long time. I haven't been rage filled and screamed at my children unnecessarily, like, for such a long time. I haven't been in that space. So that's been game changing. Like, that's really, there's a lot of freedom in that.
Yeah. I would agree that did happen when I started working with my cycle and falling in love with it. I didn't have cramps or moodiness.
Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that like,
it's almost like when we fight with anything, it's like when we resist different aspects of ourselves, maybe the shadow aspects, the ones that society have deemed wrong. When we resist them, they get louder and louder and louder. And so when we're resisting our period,
your body communicating with you, screaming at you to pay attention, just literally screaming at you as well, screaming at you to just look at me and love me, give me some attention.
It's like a kid pounding on a door.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just see this aspect. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. So with the book, Decoding the Feminine, can you just kind of give a synopsis of what the book is about? Is it? Yeah.
So it's a book / diary. There will be a book that comes out hopefully next year, that goes into a lot of detail. But the diary itself, it's a year diary, week to view diary that has the moon phases for every day of the year. So you can, whichever day you're on, see the moon phase. Alongside that, there is a space to note down your cycle day and what season you're in. And then at the beginning of the book, I introduce the book and talk about how to work with the diary, how to use it. And I talk about the moon phases, what each of the moon phases means, what kind of energy is coming up in those moon phases, and what that means for you, what that can mean for you potentially. I also talk about the seasons, what it means to be in your summer, what it means to be in your spring, because we can kind of assign that first week of your the week of your bleed, and then the second week of your period to be your spring, and then the third week to be the ovulation, and then the fourth week to be the autumn. But realistically, for most women, that's going to, some people's winters are going to be long, some people's winters are going to be short. So I go into the feelings, the sensations, the way you might be feeling, so that you can tune into your own body and find out where you are. And then the thing that I'm most excited about is that I've created something called the Moon in the Womb, a grid. And it is literally that you can see where you are in your cycle, what season, whether you're in your spring, your summer, your autumn, or your winter, along the top. And then down the left hand side of the moon phases. So you, on the day of the diary, whichever day you're on, any given day of the year, you would find your moon phase. You've noted down where you might be in your cycle, and then you can use this grid to go and cross-reference the cycle with the season with the moon phase. And it gives you like there's like a journal prompt or an inquiry, like an inquiry into yourself and your energy, and perhaps a meditation, thought for meditation, perhaps a journal prompt, perhaps just something to consider for the day, something to consider for that within that energy, just so that you can feel aligned, and so that you can use it, like use the combination of these two things. Don't fight them. Like, perhaps I feel really, really agitated and in resistance today, and I don't know why. And then check out on the grid where I am, and it's if it's the new moon and I'm in my autumn, it comes up with frustration. And am I pushing back because I need solitude? And you can give yourself permission then, because you go, oh, okay, I understand why I might be feeling like that. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with me. So yeah, and I think it's and then there's space for you to journal on things, and there's space for you to write intentions, and there's a page for gratitude at the end, and it's just a tool to learn to love yourself. It's kind of what I want it to be.
Yeah, it feels like an entry point, like a beautiful entry point to start, like starting to just track is such a beautiful entry point to start to cultivate that relationship with your period. Just knowing where you're at in your cycle can be so liberating in a sense for yourself and like your partner, your beloved, so that he can understand where you're at, what's coming up for you.
Especially when we only really pay attention to our bleed, don't we? Like, we only really pay attention to our period. Like, that's what I've noticed. Like, we know that it's there. We've got our period. I'm going to have that week where I'm going to be bleeding, and it's going to be awful. I'm going to hate every second of it, and then I'm just going to forget about it the rest of the month.
Yeah,
your body is still going through these ebbs and these flows for the rest of the month, and we're ignoring it. We're not leaning into it. We're not utilizing it. We're not honoring it. And you're right. That's the point, the purpose of the diary, to help you begin to honor yourself, to honor those seasons, to honor that flow, honor those cycles.
Yeah. One thing that came up for me when you were speaking to all of that so beautifully, just what was unlocked with cultivating that relationship with my period, was my intuition and my own like innate knowing. It was like deepening that relationship with my period allowed the clutter and noise to fall away, so that I could hear my own knowing and truth and intuition and medicine, which
definitely
resides in the womb.
I think tuning in to listen to your body goes hand in hand with listening to your intuition. The two work so well together. So it's like somebody turning the volume up, isn't it? When you start to allow yourself to tune in, the volume gets turned up on all the other aspects of yourself that you can tune into. And my intuition, definitely just even as far as just knowing how intuiting how I feel, where I am, how, like, it takes your intuition to lean into what season you're in. Sometimes we have to tune into that. Am I in my spring? Am I in my summer? Because the two, like, I'm not sure. I'm turning the volume up on that and allowing myself to receive that information, to receive it. Like I'm actually listening for it, like rather than it just being around me and I'm not really paying attention. I'm actually like, no, come on, like let me hear it. Let me hear what my body's trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. So how do crystals play into all of this, or is that completely separate, your work with crystals?
It can't ever be completely separate, because crystals are just my life.
Mhm.
So the work doesn't, the two don't cross over in so much as I mean, I don't use crystal therapy with the work that I do with women and loving your cycle and decoding the feminine, but I work with crystals on the daily anyway. They're just, I mean, I've got two sat next to me right now for this conversation that we're having, and there's several in front of me. Crystals was my entry point to my spiritual path. Crystals was where it all began for me. Crystals and meditation. But I love, and I teach a crystal therapy course. I train people to be crystal therapy practitioners as well. That's another avenue of my business. But crystals for me are just such we've talked a lot about entry points for things, and they're such an amazing entry point. I genuinely believe that crystals are the bridge between worlds. They're the bridge between universes. We live in this human existence. I'm this human being in material form, living this material life, trying to have a spiritual experience or trying to connect with a spiritual experience. And crystals cross all dimensions and vibrations and frequencies. They exist within the spiritual realms. They exist within the human realms. They exist on every level. They cross all the bridges. And so as human beings, when we first come to a spiritual kind of awakening, we look for something tangible. We look for evidence, because we're humans and we need evidence. And crystals are the evidence. They're that physical. They're that something that you can hold. I can hold it. I can see it. I can feel it. I can work with it. It's less external to me. It's less elusive and mysterious, because they're right there. They're right there. And so, and I find lots and lots of people come to crystals first before anything else. They start getting interested in crystals first, because we're all magpies as well, and they're beautiful, aren't they? They're stunning. We love things that are shiny and pretty. And yeah, they create that bridge. They create that, I can hold this in my hand and it has a spiritual connection. And perhaps I hadn't yet figured out how I can have that spiritual connection without holding something in my hand yet. But we will get there. It's just that crystals create the bridge, and they support everything. I'm a massive believer in the fact that crystals, there is nothing in the world, there's nothing in this world or in this life that you can give me that I could not give you crystals to support you with. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a situation, whether it's something that you desire, whether it's something that you're trying to achieve. There is nothing. Your business can be the most humanly three-dimensional business in the world, and crystals will still support it. You can still use them somehow for your spiritual growth, for your human growth, for your material growth, for for abundance, for manifestation, for your physical health, everything. It's a cliche, I think, or perhaps it's a meme, I'm not sure, that there's a crystal for that. There's a crystal for everything. They will literally, they're just these beautiful little earth sent angels that, yeah, they're just available to all of us for a reason. We've been given physical tools. We've been given so many tools, but we've been given physical tools out of the earth. They're born of the earth. Like, sorry, I get super excited about crystals. Can you tell?
Yeah. There's passion there for sure,
Yeah.
around crystals. I love that as the entry point. I remember when I was still working like in corporate Calgary as a designer, and I'd be in my fancy dresses with my heels on, and I would have a crystal in my bra. And that was kind of one of the entry points. And I just remember walking down the road with my work colleagues and it like fell out. And I'm like, oh, there's my
We've all done that.
There's my crystal. So what is crystal therapy? How does that work?
So crystal therapy is a very, very broad statement that covers anything that uses crystals to help you in any capacity. So crystal therapy is just the practice of using crystals in your life. So anybody can use crystal therapy. And some people are trained to be crystal therapists, which means they can just direct you in how you can use crystals in your life. So yeah, I mean, it can be physical treatments. You can actually physically have crystal therapy treatments in the way that you would have Reiki or other modalities of healing. You can buy crystal therapy jewelry, which is a beautiful way to carry crystal energy on your person all the time, and can fit every person, every budget, from really, really inexpensive crystal therapy jewelry to very, very elaborate, beautiful, bespoke pieces of jewelry. Crystal therapy can be as much as just having crystals placed around your home strategically. So that this is my rose quartz. I'm going to put it next to my bed because I want it to help me love myself. One of my favorites is having a piece of red carnelian by your front door, because red carnelian protects against negative energies, and having it by the front door protects against those negative energies entering the home. So I always have red carnelian by my front door. And yeah, so there's a lot. Crystal therapy can be the name for an awful lot of things, but if you're using crystals in your life, then you're using crystal therapy.
Beautiful. What are crystals? Are there any crystals, I believe there are, that help support you on your period?
Lots. If they're orange or red, so I love working with the energy of color. And the problem, I think a lot of people are intimidated by crystals because, oh, I don't know what that's called, I don't know what it does, they all do so many things, there's so many. So go with colors, like fall in love with the colors of them, because the colors all vibrate at particular frequencies. And if you're looking to support your period, remembering that your period is at your sacral chakra, and your sacral chakra is orange. And also we're working with like the root chakra and the winter going into the roots of ourselves. So, and your root chakra is red. So reds and orange crystals will always support with your period. They'll always support with your cycle. And they are particularly good at helping you move through. Moonstone actually is especially good at helping with your cycle because of the connection to the moon and the connection to the cycle. Moonstone's energy helps you transition between phases. It helps you move from one phase to another. And we often just think about that in the larger sense of moving through different phases of our life, or moving through different phases of the moon. But you can really, really bring that down to moving through the phases of my cycle, moving through the phases of my period. So moonstone is an excellent stone for your cycle.
Beautiful. Are there any stones around twin flames?
Oh, you can actually, if you go specifically on the lookout for quartz points that are twins. So you can get, I don't have any around me, you can get quartz points come in all manner of arrangements, but you can get quartz that are twins. So it's basically two crystal quartz points that are joined together side by side, parallel to each other, and they're really good for working with twin flame energy, like the twin crystals.
Beautiful. Are there any other fun ones that come to mind of like daily things in life that we all kind of go through, separate of twin flames, and what crystals support that?
One of my favorite, they're all my favorites. One of my favorites to tell people is to carry selenite. Have selenite with you, or have selenite in your home. Selenite moves energy from one place to another. It helps it move on. So to keep up with what needs to be a constant flow, whether that's on your person, you need to be a constant flow of energy. There needs to be no blockages of energy anywhere. In your home, there needs to be a constant flow of energy. Energy needs to keep moving. It can't get stagnant. It can't get stuck. So selenite's a great crystal for helping to achieve that. It moves stuck energy on. It moves things, moves energy, keeps energy moving. So that's a really good one. Another one of my favorites for everyday stuff is tourmalinated quartz. So tourmalinated quartz is quartz that has strands of tourmaline that have grown through it. So it's like a clear to white translucent stone that has black shards all the way through it. And it's great because the tourmaline is really grounding and really, really protective, but the quartz is really enlightening and like raises your vibration. So you have that element of having your vibration raised with the quartz, which is a master healer, while also being grounded and protected. It's a really, really, really awesome stone, really awesome crystal to use.
Beautiful. Can you speak to crystal grids, and how do you use them, and how can people use them?
Oh, crystal grids. Oh, That's the yummy one. It's a massive subject. It's a massive, massive area. So I have crystal grids. I have a crystal grid downstairs in a one of those like photo frames that you get, that I've glued the crystals into a grid. So the way I describe it when I teach crystal gridding, I describe it as though if you imagine that the crystal is the piano, like a crystal is a piano, or a crystal is a violin, or a crystal is a percussion instrument. A crystal on its own is one musical instrument, and the crystal grid is the orchestra, right? So we can create depth for the energy when we use grids, and we can create big magic when we use grids. So crystals all support each other. They amplify each other, and so bringing them into a grid format helps to amplify the energy. It also helps to kind of tweak the energy, because you can bring different crystals in. So you can bring this one in that will bring you an element of this, and this one in that will bring you an element of that. So you can really kind of tailor the energy to what you want, like a crystal prescription, if you like, to bring in those different elements of energies. And then with the use of the grid itself, I mean, you don't have to use sacred geometry or numerology in it, but you can, and you can layer it with the sacred geometry being the grid underneath, and the numerology being the number of crystals. You can work in 3s and 4s and 5s, and you can bring that into it, but you don't have to. And they can be tiny, tiny, tiny little crystal grids that fit in drawers, or you can have enormous. There are crystal grids in the world that people have. I mean, you could say Stonehenge is a crystal grid. You could say that that places like the stone circles are essentially that same energy of the crystal grid. You know, people have made enormous grids in their gardens. There's enormous grids that are in mazes. In my house, I had an extension built on my house a few years ago, and I had selenite and tourmaline put into the foundations. So I gridded my house into the foundations. The builders were very, very concerned when I was doing it, but they were pretty open-minded, so they just left me to it. Yeah, I grid my house. I grid my house with selenite. So I put a piece of selenite in all the 4 corners of my home to keep that energy moving. Yeah, crystal grids are super powerful. It's a whole world of crystal therapy that if you wanted to like just go down that rabbit hole, there's so much that you can do and play with crystal grids, and they are beautiful. Some of them, especially when people start bringing in their botanicals and they use rose petals and flowers, and stunning, really stunning.
Beautiful. Crystal elixir. What are crystal elixirs?
You're asking all the yummy questions today. Crystal elixirs are the crystal energy imbued in water. So water is a super, super powerful conductor. Water is it's amazing. It's far more magical than we give it credit for, and it can be imprinted with energy frequencies. It takes on the frequency of anything that it comes into contact with and carries that frequency. It's why it's an excellent conductor. This was proven, if you've ever seen Dr. Emoto's water experiment on YouTube, and if you haven't, I recommend looking at it because it's incredible. But we can imbue the energy of the crystal within water, and then you can use water in many, many ways that you can't use crystals in. It's something that you have to be really careful with, because there are many crystals that are toxic and cannot be put in water directly. You can go and drink the water from certain crystals there are lots and lots of crystals that are toxic and shouldn't be drunk as an elixir. So just in general sweeping terms, and this is not an exhaustive list of them, but any of the crystals that end with ite, like apatite, selenite, anything like that, shouldn't be put into water and ingested. But the quartzes, quartz, rose quartz, amethyst, they can all go in water. It's called mermaid tea. Little rose quartz and amethyst and a quartz in a water bottle. You can drink that water. Amazing crystal energy from the inside out. It's incredible. You can infuse spray bottles with like amethyst and selenite. There's an indirect method of doing it so that the crystal doesn't touch the water. You can put the crystal in a separate container, sealed container, and put that into the water if you're concerned about whether or not the crystal is toxic. But then you can create like room sprays so that you don't have to carry your crystal with you. Or if you say you went to a hotel room and you wanted to cleanse the space and you hadn't brought all of your crystals to cleanse the space, just a little bottle of crystal elixir cleansing spray and just spritz around the room and bring that crystal energy like that. You can imbue crystal energy into oils as well, so that you can use them as like perfumes, like pulse points and things. And yeah, it's incredible. So many ways that we can use them.
Beautiful. So that's part of the work that you offer is working.
Yeah, I teach. Yeah, I teach that. I have a crystal course that I offer, and we do like a level 1 and 2, which is crystals, working with crystals for yourself, and then we do the level 3, which is a practitioner level, so that you would be trained to be a crystal therapist and make elixirs and essences and grids and all that
magic.
Yeah.
All the magic. Beautiful. What's the magic with the emerald? Is there anything that comes forward with emeralds?
This is emerald. One of the stones that I have with me today, that I have with me to sit here. This is actually emerald with pyrite. Emerald is a heart opener, just the most enormous heart opener. And so these two crystals right here are the ones that, I mean, whether or not it's on video and people can't see it at home, but the emeralds with the pyrite, and then I've got amazonite, and they're palm stones, so they're really nice to hold, like they've got that really nice shape to them to hold. But these are the ones that I use in lots of my healing work, particularly when I do breath work, when I do meditation, because amazonite is a nervous system soother. It soothes the whole nervous system, brings everything into balance, calms the mind, calms the body. And then emerald with the pyrite and hematite in it is heart opening and grounding. So it opens my heart to receive and grounds me at the same time.
Beautiful. That makes sense because it's green. And then the heart chakra.
Yeah. You can use that for everything with regard to crystals. Follow the colors. Like if you don't know what crystal to go for, think about what it is that you're looking to heal or to ease or to elevate, and follow the chakra colors, and then find a crystal of that color spectrum.
Beautiful. Oh, I love that. What has been your biggest lesson along the way?
Oh, what has been my biggest lesson? Listen to myself. Listen to myself. Don't worry about other people. Listen to myself. That's taken me a really, really long time. And sometimes even now still something that I struggle with. Like I have permission to listen to my own gut, my own voice. It's been a challenge, because, and I think most women actually are, we're conditioned to put other people before ourselves. We just are. That's the nature of the world that we live in. It's, in order for me to be a decent person, as a decent woman, I need to put everybody before myself. And actually that's slowly killing all of us, because we're not looking after ourselves. So listen to what I need. Listen to what I want. Listen to what works for me, actually, and own it. You know,
that's a big one, and I think it's so powerful because, I mean, we do it for ourselves. We listen to ourselves for ourselves, but a lot of women need other reasons to do it. Yeah. And so, another reason can be that when you listen to yourself and you fill your own cup up and you really nourish yourself and tend to yourself and honor yourself with your boundaries and saying no and saying yes when it's appropriate. And that ripples out to all your relationships. Like, it's ultimately serving you, but it's also serving your kids and your beloveds and your friendships and everything.
Yeah. Oh, I'm a far better partner and mother and friend for the work that I do on myself. Far better.
Yeah. Beautiful. How do you experience the mysteries?
Do you mean how do they come? How do they come to me? How would I talk about?
Wherever you want to go with that question. For me, it's like, how do you experience the mysteries? And I mean, in the reality, it's all a mystery, but it's like, how do you tune into it?
So I've always found that I'm not great with pictures. I'm not a very visual person. I'm much better with words. I've always been much better with words and sound. I was a singer for a really long time, so music is something that's really powerful to me. And so when I tune in, I know some people see, don't they, they have all these beautiful pictures in their head, and they have all this imagery, and I just don't have that. I hear words, I hear thoughts, I hear statements, I hear whole paragraphs. Sometimes it comes to me through words and through sound and through music. I remember realizing that I used to wake up with songs in my head. I used to wake up and I'd have just the most random songs in my head, just like one line or one verse of a song in my head. And it happened my whole life. And I remember realizing that there was a message in the music, that, like, notice the song. What am I singing? What is the lyric? What is the verse? Notice it. Why has that come into my field? Because I hadn't heard it on the radio. It hadn't been played around me. So I think for me, I think the universe communicates with me through words and music. And that's how I tune into what I would consider the mysteries.
Beautiful. How do you root into the self?
Oh, by giving myself that permission. That, I think that's it's very easy to lose that rooting, to lose that footing. It's very easy to go about our lives and get wrapped up in the busyness and the day-to-day, and we forget ourselves. I can do all this work, I can put all the work in, I can create the book, and I can talk to you about the things that I do, and there'll still be times when I'll go weeks when I haven't rooted into myself, when I haven't honored myself, because I've been caught up in the humanness of this life. I've been caught up in the day-to-day. So coming back to myself is always about giving myself permission. It's always about asking myself that question: if I really loved myself, what choice would I make? And then normally there's an element of self practice in there, either meditation or crystal therapy or breath work, or something that I have been neglecting that I need to pick up again.
Yeah. Those practices are so integral in my experience to staying really deeply connected to ourselves. And I fall off the wagon all the time and we'll go months without meditating or dancing or, anything. And then when I get back on, when I come back to myself and the discipline and the devotion that it takes, I can see how different I feel about myself.
And you do feel different, don't you? You do. Like, I carry myself differently. I feel like I've got so much more clarity when I'm doing that. And I know this, but I think it is to err is to be human. So I think it is just what we do as human beings. We just disappear off on little tangents and have to remind ourselves to come back. I have to remind myself. And that's another way that we can lean into the cyclical nature of these things, by reminding ourselves that I need to come back to my winter. I need to come back to myself. I need to come back to the foundations and sending the energy to my roots.
Yeah, beautiful. Is there anything else that you want to add to this beautiful conversation, love, before we close?
No, just that to every woman that listens to this, just please know that you're magic, just because you're here and just because you're a woman, and that's enough. You're magic. Like, know it, own it.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much. And it'll be in the show notes where everybody can reach out to you and experience your magic. And your book will be out when this podcast is live. So that's really exciting. So there'll be a link for that in the show notes. And thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been I love juicy conversations. It's been so much fun.
Thank you so much for joining me for an episode of the Phoenix Rising podcast. Please like, share, download, subscribe if you enjoyed this episode. And I will see you next week for another episode on the Phoenix Rising podcast. Sending so much love.